I had been out of town for 3 days, a routine business trip that took me to Chicago. Exhausted from the back-to-back meetings and late-night dinners. All I wanted was to get back home to my wife, Amelia, and surprise her with the necklace I bought, a small token of my appreciation. We had been married for 8 years, and though things had been rocky lately, I hoped this little gesture might rekindle some of the affection that had been missing. It was early afternoon when my flight landed. I hadn't told her I was coming back a day earlier than planned. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt a small rush of excitement thinking about surprising her. But that feeling quickly turned to confusion when I noticed an unfamiliar black SUV parked near the front of our house. Who the hell could that be? I thought. My first instinct was to believe she had friends over, maybe one of her co-workers or her sister, Jenna, who visited often. But something about the blinds being drawn on a sunny afternoon didn't sit right with me. We never kept the house that dark, not unless... No, I shook that thought from my head. There was no reason to suspect anything sinister. After all, Amelia was a loving wife. At least she had been. Gripping the gift bag tightly in my hand, I opened the front door as quietly as possible, hoping to surprise her. As soon as I stepped inside, I froze. There were voices coming from upstairs, muffled at first, but undeniably intimate. My heart pounded as I heard Amelia's laughter. Light, carefree, and familiar. Only it wasn't for me. I moved slowly, my legs heavy with dread, each step up the stairs feeling like a step closer to a devastating truth I didn't want to face. My mind raced, searching for an innocent explanation. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe they're just talking. Maybe... But then I heard it. God, he did me 3 times today? I don't think I can walk straight. Amelia's voice was loud, unashamed, full of a giddiness I hadn't heard from her in years. I stopped in my tracks, gripping the handrail, so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart hammered in my chest, disbelief washing over me like a tidal wave. I wanted to turn around, to run back down those stairs and pretend I hadn't heard it. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, forced to listen as she continued. Brandon's been back for a month, and I swear I've never felt this alive, she said, giggling like a schoolgirl. It's so much better than what I have with Nick. Nick. Me. My world spun. Brandon. Her ex. The man she had once described as her first love, who moved away before we ever met. He was back, and she was with him? I should have burst through the door and confronted her, demanded an explanation for why the woman I had spent almost a decade with was sharing herself with another man. But instead, I turned and walked back down the stairs, my legs barely holding me up as I made my way to the door. I needed to get out, to breathe, to think about what I had just heard. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Once outside, I sat in my car, the keys trembling in my hands. My entire life had just collapsed in a matter of seconds. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I pack up and leave? My mind was swirling with a million questions, but one thing was clear. My wife had betrayed me, and I had no idea how far down the rabbit hole this went. To be continued. Let me know if this feels right, and I can continue from here. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. Amelia's laughter echoed in my head. Every word she said replaying over and over, a cruel reminder that the life I thought we had was a lie. Brandon, 3 times today. The words stung like poison, spreading through my veins until my entire body felt paralyzed by anger and pain. I couldn't go back inside. Not now. Not with the knowledge that she was upstairs, probably still basking in the afterglow of whatever they had done. I needed to think, needed to figure out my next move. The necklace I had bought for her, once a symbol of love and hope, felt like a weight in my pocket. I pulled it out, staring at the delicate chain, the small sapphire pendant that I thought would remind her of the early days of our marriage when things were simple, when she looked at me like I was her entire world. I flung it onto the passenger seat, disgusted with myself for being so blind. How long had she been seeing him? How long had I been the fool, thinking that our lack of intimacy was just a rough patch that we would work through? I had tried to be understanding, giving her space when she needed it, but now it was clear that she hadn't needed space from life. She needed space from me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking through my thoughts. It was a text from her. Hey babe, hope your trip's going well. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I miss you to heartsta. I stared at the message, the words mocking me. I miss you. She was lying to me, even as she was lying next to him. Miss me? The rage began to simmer again, but this time, it was more focused. If I had learned one thing in my years in business, it was this: never make a decision in the heat of emotion. I needed a plan, a way to expose her, to protect myself. This wasn't just about the betrayal. This was about control, about regaining the upper hand. Without responding to her text, I searched for something I had never thought I would need: a private investigator. By the time I arrived at the PI's office, I had already convinced myself that this was the right move. Amelia would never see it coming. I wasn't going to just confront her with accusations that she could deny or twist. No, I needed proof, solid evidence that would make it impossible for her to wriggle out of it. The private investigator, a man named Carl Daniels, came highly recommended. His office was tucked away in a quiet part of town, the kind of place you only find if you're looking for it. Carl was older, maybe in his mid-50s, with a gruff demeanor that suggested he had seen more than his fair share of infidelity cases. After I explained the situation, he nodded without much surprise. "This happens more often than you'd think," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But don't worry, I'll get you the evidence you need." "How do we start?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll put a tracker on her phone and her car. If she's meeting up with this guy, we'll know exactly where and when. I'll also get you some hidden cameras if you want to place them around the house. Do you have access to her emails or social media?" I shook my head. She's always been private about her phone, but I can probably get a look at it when she's asleep. "That's a good start. We'll need a couple of days to gather enough evidence, but once we do, you'll have everything you need." As I left Carl's office, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. This was about taking back control of my life. I wouldn't let Amelia's betrayal destroy me, not without a fight. The next few days were torture. Every moment I spent around Amelia felt like a lie, like I was living in some twisted alternate reality. She acted normal, even affectionate, as if nothing had changed between us. But I knew better. I installed the cameras Carl had given me while she was at work. One in the living room, another in our bedroom, and a final one in the guest bathroom, where I suspected she might be hiding something. I couldn't shake the feeling that the betrayal went deeper than just her affair with Brandon. That night, while Amelia slept, I carefully unlocked her phone using the code I had memorized months ago. My heart pounded as I scrolled through her messages, looking for anything that would confirm my suspicions. At first, there was nothing, just mundane texts between her and her co-workers, messages from her sister. But then I found it, a conversation with a number not saved in her contacts, but the messages were undeniably from Brandon. The texts were graphic, explicit details of their encounters, along with promises of more. "I can't wait to have you again, Amelia. Remember how good it felt last time?" I felt sick. This wasn't just a fling. This was something that had been going on for months, maybe even longer. My hands shook as I took screenshots of the messages, sending them to my email as evidence. I now had everything I needed: Carl's footage of Amelia's secret meetings with Brandon, the messages, and the recorded conversations. My next move was clear: confront her, but on my terms. I couldn't just storm in, not when I had the chance to orchestrate something much more impactful. It was Saturday morning, and Amelia was in the kitchen making breakfast, humming softly to herself. I watched her from the doorway, wondering how someone could pretend so easily, how she could look me in the eye every day knowing what she was doing behind my back. "Hey," she said with a smile when she saw me. "I thought you'd sleep in today." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I've got some things to take care of." She turned back to the stove, flipping pancakes like it was any other morning. I couldn't stand it anymore. "Actually, I was thinking we should talk." She paused, spatula in hand. "About what?" "About us," I said, my voice tight. "And about Brandon." Her body went rigid. She didn't turn around. For a moment, the only sound was the sizzling of the pancakes in the pan. "Brandon," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped closer, my heart racing. "Don't play dumb, Amelia. I know everything." She turned around slowly, her face pale. "Nick, save it," I snapped, the anger boiling over. I know about the texts. I know about the meetings. I know that you've been sleeping with him for months." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't about to fall for that. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded. "After everything we've been through, after everything I've done for you?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in weeks, I saw her mask slip, revealing the guilt she had been hiding. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It just don't." I interrupted. "Don't give me that it just happened bullshit. You made a choice, Amelia. You chose him over me." She collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I said coldly. "You did." I could feel the rage building, but I kept my voice steady. "I want a divorce." Her head shot up, eyes wide with shock. "Nick, no, please. You don't get to beg me now," I said, my voice harsh. "I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm getting half of everything, and you're not getting a single penny more." She sobbed, but I didn't feel any sympathy. This was the woman I had loved for years, but now she was a stranger, someone who had shattered my trust and my heart in one swift blow. The divorce proceedings were brutal, but I was prepared. With Carl's evidence, there was no way she could contest the terms. I got the house, the savings, everything. Brandon? He could have her. I didn't care anymore. But I wasn't done yet. A week after the divorce was finalized, I sent a copy of the footage to Brandon's employer, along with the incriminating texts. He lost his job within days. Amelia called me, furious, but I didn't answer. I'd already moved on. There was nothing left for me in that life. As I sat in my new apartment, the echoes of the past few months still fresh in my mind, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure, about taking back control of my life after someone I trusted had taken it from me. And as far as I was concerned, I had won. The days after the divorce felt surreal. I had expected to feel some kind of relief after it was all finalized, but instead, there was just a hollow emptiness. I was living in a new apartment, far away from the life Amelia and I had built, and though the wounds were fresh, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. I had won, at least on paper. I had taken her to court, gotten the house, the savings, and even managed to ruin Brandon's life in the process. But now, sitting in my sparsely furnished apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. It wasn't Amelia. I didn't want her back. But it was the life we had planned, the future we had talked about during those quiet nights when we still cared about each other. The kids we had dreamed of, the vacations we had wanted to take. All of it gone. All of it. Tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. I spent a lot of time at work, burying myself in projects to avoid thinking about what had happened. My co-workers, who had always seen me as the guy with the perfect marriage, were now giving me sympathetic looks, though none of them dared to ask for details. I wasn't in the mood to talk about it anyway. At night, I would come home to an empty apartment, the silence almost suffocating. I thought about getting a pet, something to fill the space, but I wasn't sure I was ready for any kind of responsibility just yet. I needed time to heal, but the healing wasn't coming as quickly as I had hoped. One evening, a month after the divorce had been finalized, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Amelia. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart pounding. I hadn't heard from her since the court date, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear from her now. But curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Nick," her voice was soft, hesitant. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but What do you want, Amelia?" I interrupted, not in the mood for pleasantries. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I can never undo what I did, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the couch. This was what I had been waiting for, wasn't it? An apology, some kind of acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. But now that I was hearing it, it didn't feel like enough. "I don't need your apology," I said, my voice cold. "What I needed was for you to be faithful. What I needed was for you to not destroy our marriage." "I know," she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "I messed everything out, Nick. I don't know why I did it. I was stupid. I was selfish." "Yeah, you were." I agreed, feeling the anger rise again. And now we're here. You got what you wanted, right? You're free to be with Brandon or whoever else you want. There was another long silence. Brandon's gone, she said quietly. He left me after everything came out. Said it was too much for him to handle. I couldn't help but laugh, the bitterness spilling out. Good for him. He made his bed, just like you did. Nick, I don't know what to do, she confessed, her voice breaking. I feel so lost without you. I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. You should have thought about that before you cheated. We're done, Amelia. There's no going back. I know, she sobbed. I'm sorry. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I wasn't interested in her tears, her regrets. I had spent too long crying over her betrayal, and I was done. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Over the next few weeks, I started to find some semblance of normalcy in my new life. The initial shock of the divorce had worn off, and I was beginning to accept that this was my reality now. I was single, living alone, and trying to figure out what the next chapter of my life would look like. Work had become my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, staying late at the office and volunteering for extra assignments. It was easier to focus on spreadsheets and meetings than to dwell on the empty space Amelia had left behind. One afternoon, while I was finishing up a report, my boss, Lisa, knocked on my office door. Hey, Nick, she said, stepping inside. Got a minute? Sure, I replied, glancing up from my computer. What's up? She hesitated for a moment, then closed the door behind her. I wanted to check in with you. I know things have been rough lately. Are you doing okay? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I'm getting there, I admitted. It's been a lot to process, but I'm trying to move forward. Lisa nodded, her expression sympathetic. I get it. Divorce is never easy, especially when there's betrayal involved. I looked at her, surprised. I hadn't told anyone at work about the specifics of what had happened. How did you? She smiled gently. Word gets around, Nick. But don't worry, no one's gossiping about it. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. Thanks, I said, appreciating her concern. I'm managing. Work helps, actually. I figured as much, she replied with a chuckle. You've been working like a man on a mission lately. But don't forget to take care of yourself, too. You deserve some downtime. I smiled, though it felt more like a reflex than anything genuine. Yeah, I'll try. After she left, I stared at my computer screen for a long time, her words lingering in my mind. You deserve some downtime. Did I? It was hard to remember the last time I had done anything for myself. Everything had been about fixing my marriage, then about exacting revenge, and now it was just about surviving each day. Maybe it was time to do something different. Something for me. A week later, I booked a trip. Nothing extravagant. Just a week-long stay at a cabin in the mountains, away from everything and everyone. I needed to clear my head, to get some distance from the chaos of the past few months. No phones, no work, no reminders of Amelia. When I arrived at the cabin, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The air was crisp, the trees towering overhead, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The cabin was simple but cozy, nestled deep in the woods where the noise of the outside world couldn't reach me. It was exactly what I needed. No distractions, no reminders of my old life. Just peace. The first couple of days were spent in quiet reflection. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit on the porch listening to the birds and the rustle of leaves. Sometimes I'd go for long walks through the woods, letting my mind wander. I'd been so consumed with anger and betrayal for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be, to exist without a constant churn of emotions dragging me down. But as the days passed, something else began to happen. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the grief, not just over losing Amelia, but over losing the life I thought I had, the marriage I thought was solid, the future we'd planned. I realized I hadn't truly mourned those things. I had been too focused on revenge, on proving a point, on winning. But now, in the stillness of the mountains, the grief hit me hard. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the trees, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey in hand. I thought about how much had changed in such a short time, how Amelia had been my entire world, and now she was just a painful memory, a chapter of my life that I needed to close but didn't know how. As I sat there, Watching the sky turn from orange to deep purple, I finally let myself cry. It wasn't the kind of gut-wrenching sobbing that I'd experienced when I first found out about her affair. It was quieter, more resigned, like I was finally letting go of something I'd been holding on to for too long. And with each tear, I felt a little bit lighter, a little more free. On the fourth day of my trip, I was startled by the sound of a car pulling up to the cabin. I hadn't expected any visitors. I hadn't even told anyone where I was going. My heart raced as I stood at the window, watching a silver sedan park just a few feet away from the cabin's porch. For a moment, I wondered if it was someone from work, or worse, Amelia. But then, a familiar face stepped out of the car, and I felt a wave of relief and confusion. It was my best friend, Dan. "What the hell are you doing here?" I called out as I opened the door. Dan grinned, raising a bottle of bourbon in his hand. "You didn't think you could escape without saying anything, did you? Lisa told me you were taking some time off, and I figured I'd come up and see how you're doing." I shook my head, but I couldn't help but smile. Dan had been my rock throughout the divorce, always checking in on me, making sure I wasn't spiraling out of control. He was the one who'd talked me out of doing anything drastic in the heat of the moment. The one who'd reminded me to take things one day at a time. "I'm fine," I said, though even I didn't believe it. Dan raised an eyebrow as he made his way up the porch steps. "Yeah, you look really fine," he said sarcastically. "Come on, man. Let's talk." We sat outside, the bourbon warming our insides as the night air grew cooler. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Dan knew better than to push me to talk before I was ready. But eventually the words started to come. "I thought I was over it," I admitted, staring at the glass in my hand. "But being here, away from everything, I don't know, it's like all the stuff I tried to ignore is finally hitting me. I thought I'd feel better after the divorce, after ruining Brandon's life. But I don't." Dan nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "Revenge never really gives you closure. It just leaves you with more questions." I sighed. I keep thinking about what went wrong, how I didn't see it, how she could lie to me for so long and still act like everything was fine. "That's because she didn't want to lose you," Dan said. "People do stupid things when they're scared. Maybe she thought she could have both. You and the thrill of something new." I scoffed. "Well, she lost me anyway." "Yes, she did, and that's on her. But now, you need to stop thinking about her. She's not your problem anymore." I knew he was right, but knowing and doing were two different things. Amelia had been such a huge part of my life for so long, and now that she was gone, I didn't know who I was without her. When I returned from the cabin, something had shifted in me. The anger was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. The grief, though heavy, was starting to feel more manageable. And I realized that I had to start thinking about my future, my life without Amelia. I threw myself back into work, but this time it wasn't about escaping. It was about building something for myself. I started taking on bigger projects, pushing myself to achieve more. I wanted to prove to myself that I was more than just a broken man recovering from a failed marriage. It wasn't easy. There were still days when the loneliness crept in, when I'd come home to an empty apartment and wonder if I'd ever feel whole again. But there were also days when I felt hopeful, when I thought about the possibility of starting over, of meeting someone new, of building a life that was truly mine. One evening, as I was packing up to leave the office, Lisa stopped by my desk. "Hey, Nick," she said, smiling. "I've been meaning to talk to you." "About what?" I asked, curious. She leaned against the edge of my desk. "I've noticed how hard you've been working lately, and I just wanted to say, I'm impressed. I know it hasn't been easy, but you've really stepped up." I felt a warmth spread through me, her words hitting harder than I expected. "Thanks," I said, feeling a little awkward. "I'm just trying to keep busy, I guess." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. And I was wondering if you'd be interested in something." She paused, glancing at me with a thoughtful expression. "We got an opening for a senior project manager. It's a big step up, more responsibility, but I think you'd be perfect for it." I blinked, taken aback. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she said, smiling. "Think about it. You got the experience, the work ethic, and I think it's time you got some recognition for everything you've been doing around here." For the first time in a long while, I felt a surge of excitement. It wasn't the kind of excitement that came from getting back at someone or proving a point. It was the excitement of seeing a new path open up in front of me. A path that had nothing to do with Amelia or the life I had lost. "I'll think about it," I said, but in my heart I already knew my answer. A few weeks later, I accepted the promotion. The new role came with more responsibilities, but it also came with a sense of purpose. I had something to focus on now, something that wasn't tied to my past. The work was demanding, but I thrived under the pressure. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I was moving forward. One night, after a particularly long day at the office, I stopped by a local bar for a drink. I wasn't in the mood for company, but the bar was busy, and I found myself seated next to a woman around my age. She was attractive with dark hair and a confident smile, and after a few moments of polite conversation, we ended up talking about everything: work, life, the weather. I didn't mention Amelia. I didn't mention the divorce. For the first time in a long time, I was just Nick, not the guy whose wife had cheated, not the guy who had spent months plotting revenge. Just a man having a drink with a stranger, enjoying the simplicity of a conversation with no strings attached. Her name was Rebecca, and she worked in marketing. She was witty, smart, and easy to talk to. We ended up staying at the bar longer than I had planned, and by the time I left, I had her number saved in my phone. The next few days were a blur of work, meetings, and emails, but every now and then, I found myself thinking about Rebecca. It had been so long since I had felt any interest in another person that it almost felt foreign. Could I really move on? Could I really let someone new into my life after everything that had happened? I wasn't sure, but I decided to take a chance. A week after meeting her, I texted Rebecca, asking if she'd like to grab dinner sometime. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place that felt intimate but not too formal. I was nervous, more nervous than I'd been in years. But when she walked in, all my nerves seemed to melt away. Dinner was easy. The conversation flowed, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. There was something about Rebecca that put me at ease. She didn't know about my past, didn't know about the wreckage I had been sorting through for months. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain any of it. I could just enjoy the moment. Our first date turned into a second, and then a third. Before I knew it, I was seeing Rebecca regularly, and with each date I felt a little more like myself again. The anger and bitterness that had weighed me down for so long began to lift, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a while: hope. It wasn't that Rebecca was some kind of magical cure for everything I had been through. I knew that healing would take time, and there were still moments when the past crept in, uninvited. But she made me realize that there was a future beyond the pain, that I didn't have to be defined by what Amelia had done. One night, as we sat together on her couch, watching an old movie, I realized something. I was happy, truly happy. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't thinking about revenge or betrayal or what could have been. I was thinking about the present, about the possibilities ahead. I'd come a long way from the man who had sat in his car, listening to his wife betray him with another man. That part of my life was over. It was time to start a new chapter, one that was entirely mine. As things progressed with Rebecca, I couldn't help but reflect on how much my life had changed. A year ago, I was consumed by betrayal, driven by anger and the need for revenge. I had thought that exposing Amelia and Brandon would give me closure, but the truth was, it had only left me empty. Now, sitting across from Rebecca during one of our many late-night dinners, I realized that healing wasn't about revenge or getting even. It was about letting go of the pain, the anger, the need to understand why things had happened the way they did. Rebecca was different. She wasn't part of my old life, and she didn't ask questions about it. That was part of why being with her felt so liberating. She didn't pry into my past, didn't try to fix me, as some people had done after they found out about the divorce. She simply let me be. "You've been quiet tonight," Rebecca said, smiling at me from across the table. I shook myself from my thoughts and smiled back. "Just thinking," I replied, "about how things are different now." "Different good, I hope?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, taking a sip of my wine. "Yeah, definitely good." And it was good. I wasn't naive enough to think that I was completely healed or that I had everything figured out. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. Things with Rebecca continued to progress naturally. We started spending weekends together, exploring the city, going on hikes, and even traveling to a few nearby towns. I felt alive again, and in some ways, I felt like I was rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage to Amelia. But the past, as much as I tried to leave it behind, had a way of creeping back in. One afternoon, months into my relationship with Rebecca, I was sitting at a coffee shop when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message was clear. "Can we talk? I need to explain." I knew who it was before I even opened the message. Amelia. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block the number, and keep moving forward with my life. But another part of me, the part that still carried the weight of everything that had happened, wanted to know what she had to say. I told myself it was curiosity, that I just wanted to hear her side, to see if there was any sense to be made of the mess she had created. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I hadn't fully closed the door on that chapter of my life, and maybe hearing her out was the only way to finally do it. After a few minutes, I texted back, "Meet me tomorrow at noon. Same coffee shop." And that's how it ended. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below. Tell us, what would you have done in their shoes? And stay tuned for the next tale, because trust me, things are only going to get more intense. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.